Thank you for the introduction. I appreciate that. Yeah, super excited to be here at BSidesKC. Last time I spoke here was about 3 years ago, so I'm super excited to be back. Really love the theme and all the volunteers that helped put this all together. So it's super thankful to be here. As you said, I'm just Sam Wallace. I'm just a guy. I'm local in Kansas City. I'm not a vendor. I have nothing to sell you. I've been in this space for about 15 years now, largely on the security side of the software development. So, which is, as you might imagine, over the last 3 years has bled really nicely to the AI security space. I've watched it all kind of unfold. All the developers going crazy, and I really want to talk about that in this talk. Just given all the madness we're seeing in the world. As a disclaimer, this is a Mythos-free talk. I won't be talking about Mythos at all, so we're going to avoid that. As a disclaimer, everything I talk about is my own opinion, doesn't reflect my employer. I do have a day job. It's nothing to do with that. If you do see anything that looks like your production environment, that's purely coincidental and has nothing to do with this talk. So who's this talk for? I would say there's a couple of AI talks after this one, and I think this talk is going to be a great prereq to kind of get some of the foundational concepts. So largely, if you're at a business right now, most businesses are thinking about agents, they're deploying agents. There's third-party vendors they're working with to deploy these agents. And this talk is going to go into detail about that. And largely, if you're a student, you're learning up to foundationals, this will extend a bit of that. And really, we all keep hearing about AI. It's forced. If you go on LinkedIn, it's AI. LinkedIn, it has nothing to do with security anymore. It's only about AI. So this talk is for you. So if we kind of think back on every generation of technology that comes out, we see that every technology is forced upon us, and they kind of get that free pass initially. So if you look at the web applications that came out, we had all the cross-site scripting, we have the SQL injection type vulnerabilities, super prevalent. Then we had the cloud. The cloud came out, it was here to save us. Everything got shipped to the cloud, all the cost savings that never actually happened, all the security issues, and we're really still dealing with that. And then we had the containers come out, right? And we had all of our code was then, the runtime is now in a container. Everything is running as root, all the dependencies, all the issues there, right? And now where you are today, as you sit here, is you're in this AI agent world where we have these new AI agents. We don't necessarily have all the security controls we'd like. We don't have all the monitoring we'd like. However, the business is going to do what the business does, and they're going to ship it, right? So that's where we are right now. So here's a clear delineation between what a chatbot is versus what an agent is. This is really the core difference here. The big thing here is the consequences of getting an agent wrong is much different. So we look at the chatbots. That's you have this user interface. You just chat in and out, right? It's very basic, nothing too crazy. There's no agent involved, just pure inference. And the worst things that come out of this is really hey, we got a new system prompt and nobody really cares. Opus 4.7 system prompt is on GitHub. Nobody really cares. If you have a chatbot out there, for your business, someone gets your system prompt, still nobody really cares, right? So that's kind of that world. The second world here is what we're going to be talking about, which is the agents. The agents have API access. They have full autonomy. They have network requests they're making. These agents are acting on behalf of users, and the risk here is far different than your traditional chatbots. As a real life example of an agent kind of gone wrong, the state of Utah, they had this great idea to have an agent sort of handle prescription refills. So not like a doctor AI, but just the prescription part. And some security researchers looked at this and they said, well, we were able to sort of manipulate the prompt in a way to triple dosage. So they were able to feed it new updates, and it trusted those updates from the user. They were able to triple the dosage. They were able to reclassify methamphetamine as a safe treatment, again, with careful prompting, careful manipulating the agent. And then lastly, they were able to manipulate like what the agent thought was true, and sort of like get it to have a misaligned vaccine like conspiracy kind of claims. So I'll quote Aaron here directly. He said, "These targets are some of the easiest things I've ever broken in my entire career." So thank you for that. So I would say agent security, these are like the main three pillars. We're going to go through each of these, but we have the guardrails, we have the identity, and we have sandboxing. We're going to go through each of these. All right, so guardrails. So I know we've all heard of like jailbreaking and like prompt injection, and like there's like this new world of like AI specific vulnerabilities that exist. There's also like a new control mechanism here called guardrails. So think of guardrails as kind of like a web application firewall. It works most of the time, but it's not perfect, right? It's not a silver bullet, doesn't block everything. The intention here is whenever input comes in, before it hits inference, it goes through a policy-based engine, and it has that, thumbs up, thumbs down, or monitor this or monitor that kind of thing. So it gets inspected on input, and then right before it goes back to the user, it gets inspected again and get with your policy engine for like that output validation. I think guardrails then largely, getting people to understand like this new like language model world is a little bit different. I think a lot of that is rooted in what we've been taught like in school, we've been taught at like previous jobs. Regexes don't work, hashes don't work, signatures don't work. All these like rule engines that we really like from other tooling, they just don't work. That's because these language models, it's not about exactly what you're saying, it's about the intent of your message. There's this new class of vulnerabilities where you're sort of manipulating language models to do things. So you can't really write a regex for that, and that's why this new guardrails engine is super critical to kind of fill this gap. And to delineate here, there's inference, which is like that autocomplete engine that we're all familiar with. This is just like the in and out from the model, and then guardrails itself proper. So for guardrails, there's open source solutions out there. Like if you've ever played with like Light LLM, they have a guardrail section, and they have like a laundry list of like guardrails you can try out. You can actually like run your inference in like Azure OpenAI. On their AI service as an AI service, and then you can run your guardrails like out of AWS if you wanted, right? So these aren't necessarily coupled. Often they are coupled and kind of sold together as an easy button, like, hey, just add this to your Terraform and get free guardrails. But you can separate these entirely. And this is, as you kind of look at guardrails, you're going to find very quickly that they're going to force you to be a little bit more social. They're going to force you to talk to the other side of the business. A lot of what guardrails has to offer is that there's like the compliance and there's like the quality of the response. You have all the normal like denied topics, like maybe I don't want my company agent to talk about like my competitor. Maybe I don't want my agent talking about bombs. Maybe I don't want my agent talking about whatever, right? Like that's not necessarily a security thing. However, these guardrails configurations have that kind of all bundled up in one config. So of course they have like, I would call it, guardrails has like a subset of security, and it's primarily not security related. That's kind of how I feel about it. And here's kind of an example of like the different like things that guardrails have. This is just from AWS has guardrails. Again, I'm not paid by AWS, this is just a popular one. They have guardrails if you're running like an agent core runtime. This is an option for you. So as you can see, I kind of labeled these like, hey, this one like content filters is more about safety, AI safety, than it is security. Or denied topics is maybe about your business. Of course, we have the security one, like maybe my agent shouldn't ever return like PAI or PHI data. Maybe that's completely outside the scope of my agent. So this is really like business specific stuff, and you're going to need input from the other side of the business to really implement this correctly. So when it comes to agents, one of the critical parts of agent, and I'm sure you've seen this like everywhere, is identity. That's because these agents do have that autonomy. They do have the ability to interface with like third-party APIs, databases, or whatever other tool calls that you're intending to implement. There's largely like two like camps, I'll say, two patterns. There's the top pattern, which is the service account pattern. This is like the most common pattern that I've seen. This is giving your AI root. Your AI has like an administrative level key, has full access to this API, and then all your tool calls are using that API key, right? This is kind of like, it works really fast on your local laptop. It gets deployed, right? This is just going to be a frictionless experience that developers are expecting here. The bottom pattern here is like token delegation pattern. Again, a little bit harder to get right. The core difference here is instead of giving your AI like a full admin access, what you're doing is you're actually using the user's token and acting on their behalf. A good example of this is like if you're using like any like chat products and you click like, hey, I want to connect to my Google Drive. Like Anthropic doesn't have access to all of Google Drive. So when you give it access, it's going to be acting on your behalf using your permissions and making and facilitating on your behalf. Even with token exchange, there's like I would say like two ways to do that as well with this flow. So there's impersonation and then there's like true on behalf of token exchange. So for impersonation, this is where you get the JWT or like the user's token, and you're passing that directly onto that third-party API. What you're losing here by doing this method is that API has no idea it's coming from an agent, so you lose that audit log, the audit trail there. So you're probably deemed on my compliance side. And then on the token exchange, like true on behalf of, what is happening here is the user goes to your identity provider, they get a JWT, the agent then exchanges that for a new token. This token is going to be, the claims will be scoped down to just the tool calls expected. It's going to have a shorter lifetime, so it's not going to have a full lifespan that the user JWT had. And then that API also gets the ability to see like, this is a action from this agent, but on behalf of a user, so you have the full picture here. Last slide on identity, kind of where I see it heading, is there's a new RFC called cross-app access, largely led by Okta. It's still in draft, so it's like, still pretty new. And this may not be like the RFC that everyone's like going to abide by, but I think the principle here will stay. In short, imagine you're at an enterprise and you want to roll out like an agent solution, like I want to roll out like Anthropic, like enterprise to everyone. Well, everyone, when they connect their third-party apps, they have to like consent, and everyone absolutely hates that, right? What cross-app access is intending to do is you have an enterprise level settings where you like pre-consent for all your users, you let them know what they have access to, and they don't have to go through that flow. So I would say if you hear that, keep an eye on it. I think it may not be exactly this, but that principle will we'll see. Okay, so the last topic is sandboxing. So really what sandboxing is, we still have like that. Everyone's figuring out agents, everyone's deploying agents, and what they want to do is they just want to deploy it as is, full file system access, full network access, full admin key, right? Like this is just the easy way. This probably reminds you of like your cloud days. This probably reminds you of like when we first started new web applications, containers. We just need to get it working. We need to improve the value, right? So this is like what developers want to do. And then like on the right side, this is like what we're going to be talking about next few slides is we're going to have like a virtual file system. We're going to use the least privileged API key, all that good stuff, right? So this is like a common theme of like new technology comes out, rapidly deploy it, and then kind of figure out security as we go, right? So when it comes to sandboxing, I'm going to cover tool design first. This is like a super critical to the next few slides here. So you can't really do sandboxing unless design your tools in the way we were able to. So the top here and then the red is a tool call. It says execute single query. It just takes any query as a string and it's just going to run it, right? This should immediately have like red flags going off in your brain. This is like SQL injection all over again. Like SQL injection as a service. It's not even a security vulnerability. It's like intended design is to run any arbitrary SQL like code and just let the user do that, right? This is really good tool call for like infinite capability. And when it comes to tool call design, there's a few. I think I've got a link to the bottom, kind of small, but there's a few like white papers kind of out there and talking about tool call design. But the short of it is that your tool call design should be intentional. So we look at get customer orders. We take a string. This is like a predefined flow. It's purpose built. It's scoped, and there's not like a whole lot of flexibility here. And then like search products, and then look at activity order. It's really like a lot of these lessons we're having to like relearn from like 2005, kind of like again in a new agent way. It's going to remind you of like parameterized queries if you're familiar with that. With sandboxing, there's like two main patterns here that is pretty common. There's pattern one where the agent is living in the sandbox, and there's pattern two where you're actually sandboxing the tool call itself. So I'll cover these. The first one, pattern one, very very simple. Your agent lives in basically its own container, its own little world, has access to. It still has outbound network access. But doesn't have any access to your network. It's fully containerized. It has its own virtual file system. The problem with pattern one largely is that you do have to have the actual API key inside that sandbox environment. This is because for your agent to actually be useful and to make those tool calls, that API key must be accessible because your third parties are depending on that. And then on pattern two, so this is actually sandboxing your tool execution itself. So this is going to have a concept of a host and then like a sandbox tool execution environment. So your API key is able to be separated, living on your host, and then not used directly in your compute environment. Pattern two doesn't really make sense. That's why there's another slide on just on pattern two to kind of walk through it. So for pattern two, so if I'm saying I can't give my tool execution an API key, how is that going to work? It needs to reach outbound, and it needs to make those network requests. It needs to be useful to my users using and consuming my app. How you should think about this is you're going to have host site tools, and you're going to have tools that you're able to sandbox. So host site tools is going back to that you need to design your tool calls in a way where we have the get customer ID example here, that they're thoughtful, they're intentional. There's not a whole lot of abstract going on either. It's very structured. And then on the right side, your sandbox tool, these are very flexible tool calls that really let you run arbitrary code safely and make your agent useful. So imagine you get a question inbound from a user and they want some amount of data, but they want parsed in a certain way. That they're making a deck for a presentation. You might do a host site tool call where you get all the data, and then they want it organized in a certain way. You pass the data to a sandbox tool. The sandbox tool doesn't have any network access, doesn't have API keys, it doesn't have anything. It's just an ephemeral execution environment. It takes the data, it's going to take the model's output, that Python code or whatever it's going to run. It's going to manipulate the data and then return it back. So in the event that the user is able to manipulate the model to generate some bad code, there's no exfil opportunity here. There's no ability to get the API key. There's no network access here. So this allows you to build. Pattern two requires you to really know what your agent is going to be doing, and you have a thoughtful design behind it. And largely, when it comes to the agent world, what you're learning in school, if you're a student or if you're you're early on in your career or whatever, it doesn't really matter. You don't necessarily need to start from scratch. A lot of these concepts you're gonna sort of remember and they're gonna rhyme, right? Like we talked about like how these new technologies come out. If this one feels the same to me as like going to the cloud or like forcing everyone to use containers. So what you need to do is think about it that way. Take these skills, like your traditional application security skills, and apply them to this like agentic world, and it'll make a lot more sense. So when you think about like SQL injections, think about like prompt injections. It's similar enough. Another one that resonates with a lot of people is like the web application firewall. It's like WAF, very similar to a guardrail, right? It's not the silver bullet, it protects a lot of stuff, not perfect. And then the parameterized queries. So like whenever you build your SQL queries, that's very similar to thinking about tool call design. So this is like working with developers to get them to understand that your tool call design matters, and being intentional about that allows you to sandbox your execution properly. So here's like the five key takeaways I would say when it comes to like working with your developers, and then getting them to think about like their agents a little bit different is really like the agentic AI stuff is definitely different. It's a new threat model for sure. It's way different than chatbots. There's much higher level business risk. A lot of these agents are like, they represent your company, they interface with your customers directly. So this is certainly like high risk, and you should be thinking about identity, you should be thinking about guardrails and sandboxing as well. For two, guardrails, how I think about it is it's kind of like a WAF, but really it's going to force you to be a little bit more social with the other side of the business. You're probably going to start thinking about like responsible AI and safe AI. In that kind of world, there is a subset of security with guardrails. And then identity is like it's really easy to get wrong. So we talk about like the service account pattern, and then we talk about like if you can get your developers to avoid impersonation and do a true on behalf of flow, which is really critical here. 4, we talked about sandboxing. So this is like write your agents in a way where you're even able to sandbox your tool execution. So don't write tool calls in a way where like every tool call shouldn't require an API key. They shouldn't require network access. You should be able to split the responsibility of tool calls that need that level of access, and then tool calls where you're able to have a safe executive environment where you can run random Python code from your model. And then 5 here, this is not really like defense in depth. I think if you get any of these wrong, you just completely lose that protection. So there's like, you really need to think about like these as like individual pillars that don't necessarily like protect you if you do just one of them. You really got to do all 3 of them just right. Or to put simply, stop keeping your AI roots. So yeah, that's. Have a good day.